Throughout the course of the cultural competency class, we have learned to gain knowledge and understanding of other groups, as well as reflect deeply about our own thoughts, emotions, and actions. This video will give a glimpse into my life and how my past, present, and future have affected and will affect my profession as a social worker. It is clear that traits and ways of life can be passed down from generation to generation, so we will begin this journey talking about my parents. My mom came from a great home where her parents were loving and protective. My grandmother had come from a home of abuse, so she wanted to make sure her children did not have to go through that. My mom has a very dominant personality. She is someone who will always speak her mind, yet is so gentle towards those who need comforting. My mom graduated from high school, however, she did not go to college right away. When me and my sister were younger, my mom attended 10 years of summer classes to gain her local pastor's license. She moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, where she became an office manager for an insurance company. My father, Chuck, grew up in a wonderful home environment as well. My grandfather was more about tough love, while my grandmother had a very gentle spirit. My dad is a soft-spoken person. He will tell you what you need to know when you need to know it, and although he's quiet, he has the greatest sense of humor. My dad's family did not really talk about their feelings or things going on in their lives, so my dad has that quality about him. Even if he doesn't always talk about his feelings, he will be the first to sit down and listen to you talk about yours. He moved to Charlotte, North Carolina as well, and that is where him and my mother met. After getting married, my mom and dad had their first baby girl in September of 1988. My sister Shannon was born and has all the qualities that a firstborn child tends to acquire. She is responsible, barely ever got in trouble, and was like a second mother to me growing up. 5 years later, I came around in August of 1993. Of course, I had to come into the world with a dramatic and stubborn debut, like any youngest child of the family should. And of course, those two words set the course for how the rest of my life would be. I was a drama queen growing up, I got in a lot of trouble with my parents, and I was definitely irresponsible. Thankfully, I grew out of most of that. However, at school, I was very shy and timid. I'm sure my parents were sad they didn't see that side of me at home. I grew up in a family with very strong Christian beliefs. Not long after my sister was born, my mom started working at our church as a nursery caregiver, but soon after became the children's minister. 25 years later, she still works at our church as an associate pastor of evangelism. Always being around my mom and at church, seeing her counsel, pray, and have compassion on the people she works with truly impacted how I interact with people. I believe that the mix between my dad's soft-spoken spirit and my mom's love of all people gave me the perfect platform to begin my longing to be a social worker. My first experience with a counselor came when I was in 6th grade. About 3 years earlier, when I was in 3rd grade, September 11th happened. I was at school when it occurred, and that day started a very long journey in my life. After September 11th, I got very fearful of everything around me. I developed severe separation anxiety from my mom. I began to have a hard time doing everyday tasks. As embarrassing as it was to me, my mom knew I needed help, especially when my teachers began to tell her that my demeanor in class had changed. I started seeing a therapist my 6th grade year who tremendously impacted my life. She helped me talk through my problems, write down my prayers, and find effective ways to cope with separation anxiety. To this day, I still struggle with it, but it is a much more mild form, and I can finally keep myself calm when I start to feel anxious. Life went on, and my years of middle school and high school consisted of many church retreats, service projects, and mission trips. My love of traveling and interacting with people all over the world began to quickly grow, and before I knew it, I was longing to go everywhere, just to get insight and experience other cultures. Most of my friends in high school were not of the same race as me, which gave an open door to exploring different backgrounds. I finally graduated from high school in 2011, but was struggling to get into the schools I wanted to attend. So I finally decided to go to Georgia Gwinnett College, right near my house. I wasn't sure why I couldn't get into any schools like my friends had been doing, but God knew exactly why, and in July of 2011, I got the answer. July 6, 2011, my dad was diagnosed with leukemia and had to begin immediate chemo treatments at Emory Hospital. My world was completely tossed upside down. Over the next days and months, people continually prayed for us, loved on us, and talked with us. I got to see God work in amazing ways, and 3 months later, my dad was said to be in remission. Life wasn't back to normal, but God was showing me that no matter what, He will take care of us. While in the hospital, my dad and mom had to talk with social workers to help with the discharge process, as well as forms needing to be filled out. He had several different social workers each time. Some were very helpful, and some not so much. I saw in those moments how important it was to a family to have a social worker who did everything they could to help them and be positive. And this was yet another moment that helped shape my desire for social work. College seemed to be flying by, and I had finally made the decision to be a social worker. As soon as that happened, an opportunity laid itself in front of me that would help secure the fact that social work was my calling. In the summer of 2013, I was offered an internship position at the United Methodist Children's Home, where I would be helping plan and run a summer camp for children on the campus. The children who came there had all kinds of different backgrounds. Some had left home with their mom to flee domestic violence, some had been homeless, and others could not afford another summer camp. Each kid that walked in the door had their own past, their own history, and their own personality. That summer, I learned firsthand what it was like working in an environment where you truly have to learn skills to effectively deal with children who have come from a life of abuse and traumatic situations. That summer was the most difficult and the most beautiful summer, all in one. Now here I am at Georgia State, majoring in something that I love. Before becoming a social worker, it is important to become culturally competent, and to help with that, it was crucial to immerse myself in different cultures. I am very interested in religion and spirituality, so for that reason, 3 out of 4 of my cultural immersions were attending and exploring different religions. I went to a Messianic Jewish synagogue, a monastery, and a Hindu temple. At each place, I got to talk to at least one person who was in that religion. To me, the most significant part of each of the immersions was seeing how passionate the people were about their faith. From the monks taking the vow of silence, to the Messianic Jews believing the entire Bible, yet holding to their Jewish traditions, to finally the Hindus holding such high respect for their deities. To be able to hear about each religion and their practices was informative and impactful. My final cultural immersion was interviewing an African American male. The reason I chose this immersion was because many of my friends are African American, yet we never talk about the oppressions that they face. I wanted to talk with my friend to see how he has felt discriminated against. The interview was eye-opening for me, to hear the struggles my friend had experienced that I had no idea about. After interviewing other groups of people, I began to look at the groups I was a part of. My subordinate groups were being female, being in an interracial relationship, and being a student or part-time worker. The most shocking subordinate group to me was the interracial relationship. Looking back, it was definitely noticeable throughout our relationship that people would look at us when we went to the mall or just to go out to dinner. My dominant groups were being Caucasian, being a Christian, and being heterosexual. Each of the categories of dominant and subordinate have their strengths and their weaknesses. And although we do not always choose to put ourselves in certain groups, it is interesting for me to see where in my life I have experienced oppressions and where in my life I may be the oppressor, even if it's not intended. Throughout this semester, I have learned not only about various groups, but much about myself. This journey to cultural competency has led me to a more passionate approach to social work. Before, I thought it was just enough to have compassion on people and to love them. However, it is much more than that. It is understanding their struggles and cultures so that I can help them in the best way possible. The group presentations in class helped to increase my knowledge about oppressed populations. Taking the pretest at the beginning of the semester, I got a score of 79 on the first survey and a 179 on the second. My post-test scores went up points to a 129 on the first survey and a 259 on the second. The scores rose 125 points altogether. I hope to take what I have learned about cultural competency and awareness and continue to learn and grow as a social worker. My specific interest in social work is to advocate for children whose voices would otherwise not be heard. I hope that as a class, we continue to be passionate about our work and begin to make positive changes for our world.